Hi everyone. I think we see people coming in. We'll wait for maybe another 30 seconds and then we'll start. All right. We can probably start as people are coming in. What do you think, Nicole?
Yes, I think that makes sense.
Okay. All right. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. So today thank you for joining MII's webinar. Today we're talking about the state of the next gen materials industry. So last week, MII published the report. We do that annually on reporting on the state of the next gen materials industry. Today we have, I think many of you may already know, the co-founder and CEO of MII. Nicole is here with us. Thank you for joining us. So Nicole, probably a lot of you have actually worked with Nicole, and MII is here to promote, to support the next gen material industry that provides high performance, animal free, and environmentally preferable materials to the world. So to this end, we have these research, we have a lot of reports, and have a look at our website, and you can get a lot of resources there. So Nicole has had a long journey, career experience in working in nonprofits. She's also a lawyer. And so we're very happy to have Nicole here with us today. And then myself, again, hi again. I think a lot of you might have, we might have talked or seen each other at conferences. So I'm the main author of this industry report. As mentioned, this is the fourth year of us doing this. So it's quite interesting that we've been following the data, following the changes in the industry, and seeing how things unfold. So without further ado, I think we'll jump into having a chat about what's been up with the industry. So we'll start with having a chat between Nicole and myself, and then we'll dive a little bit more into the investment in highlights that you can also find in the report. And then we'll end with a Q&A session. So we'll start with Nicole. I think let's address the elephant in the room. So a lot has been happening in the industry recently, a lot in the news, right? So, I mean, a lot of media outlets have reached out to ask about your views on Renewcell filing for bankruptcy, I'm sure. So what do you think about how the industry has been digesting this, and are they focusing on the right things when trying to analyze the wider implications of this case, you think?
Great. Thank you so much, Elaine. That's a really excellent question. One note, would you mind putting the presentation down for a second, and then you and I could chat and we could bring it back up? Done?
Sure. So I'll stop sharing for a bit here.
Yeah, now I can see you better. Hi, everyone. I think it's hard to start this conversation without talking about Renewcell. But honestly, I think that the worry is a little bit overblown. I think that we forget that in most new technologies and industries, there will be a lot of failures in the beginning. And a lot of the time, the first movers don't succeed. Anyone remember Friendster? Not really, right? So there are, just because one company fails doesn't mean that the industry is not viable, or that, there's not demand for, next gen materials. I think that's the important thing to state up front. And then number two, I just want to qualify this and say I haven't talked to the heads of Renewcell, so this is just based on our independent analysis, and they might have different commentary. But there is a really great article by Brooks Roberts Islam, and actually I'll put it in the chat. It's in Forbes, that talks a lot about these issues. And I think it's important to remember that number one, sustainability is not enough, right? That just having I'm finding the chat here. So just having a good business, a good idea that's, more sustainable or animal-free material, that doesn't mean the business is going to be successful. There has to be a business case for brands, so fashion brands, to use those materials. And in this situation, there were quite a few concerns. I think number one, I have heard commentary that their performance wasn't really up to industry expectations. And so when you're asking an industry to take over, use a new material and replace something else, you really do have to show them that there is a value. And if the material isn't, up to standards, that's a problem. Two, it was designed to replace things like a lyocell, right? Which honestly, there are good options in lyocell, right? The concern is destroying old growth forests, but there are companies that are producing lyocell, like Tencel, that don't. And so how much is the environmental impact? How much better is that? Three, price is a major consideration. So the price has to be, it can be a little bit more, but not a lot more. And so getting to price parity is really critical because remember, it's businesses and they have to make a profit. And then finally, I think fitting into the supply chain. Part of the issue is that Renewcell does produce pulp. They don't produce an end product that the brands would buy directly. So they have to buy it through, an intermediary that does produce the material that they buy. And then something that Brooke talks about in her Forbes article, which I think is really important, is for any new material company thinking about where to build your production facilities, building in a place that's close to the supply and the production is really important. So Renewcell did use waste produced in manufacturing facilities, so cuts of the material. It's not post-consumer, so you couldn't send in your jeans to be recycled. It's at the manufacturing facilities, which in general were in Asia. And Renewcell's production facility was in Europe. And so that is also another big disconnect. So I think it's really important for everyone to look more at the specifics and think about that. And the industry can really learn from the lessons of Renewcell.
Yeah, thanks for bringing up. I mean, a lot of this discussion, without going into the nuances, it is just like creating narratives that really, without going into the details, probably don't take us anywhere. And we can't really have a meaningful discussion without the details. Having said that, yeah, sorry, please add.
I thought about one more thing that it would be really good for material companies to think about when you're developing, or any entrepreneurs or investors when you're looking at getting into this industry. And we talked about this in our white space report that was published, I think around 2 years ago, and you can find it on our website. And we're going to be publishing it again this summer, but the idea is the same, which is material science done right. And I think obviously we're a nonprofit. I am in this because I care about the environment and I care about animals. And a lot of people who create these companies are doing the same thing, right? They see this opportunity and they want to address a problem, right? Which is fashion's impact on the environment. And they're looking at waste. And what do we do with that waste, right? How can we take something that we're not using anymore and turning it into something valuable? If very, noble cause, but if you're actually looking at this from a business perspective and you're thinking about material science, it's actually the wrong way to go about doing it. So instead of saying, here's something that is waste we don't use anymore, what can we do with it? You should be thinking, here's the end goal. What do we need, right? And what's the best way to create that? And that's material science done right. And we really encourage anybody who's thinking of creating a new company or investing in a company to think about it in that term.
Right. Thank you for that sharing. Kind of going back to yes, business is business. In the media, though, like a lot of people are trying to sort of blame it on fashion brands for not backing material innovators. Do you think does it go so far that brands have an obligation to explore and buy up these new materials?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question too. It's a lot of what we're reading in the press is blaming brands, right? To say that there's this lack of urgency and a lack of demand, and that, Renewcell did fail because of, under expected demand for their products. But the question of whether, right, the brands have an obligation to come in and buy the materials, I guess I would answer in two ways. Yes, but not for the reason you would think. What people forget is that brands are for-profit companies, right? And I'm talking about fashion, say automotive, home goods brands that are purchasing next-gen materials. They're for-profit companies, right? They're not nonprofits. They aren't obligated to, have a, positive impact on the world, right? Unless they're a B Corp. They're obligated to make money for their shareholders, right? That's in the end how they're held accountable. And so having an obligation without government intervention, right? I do think we need a lot of, more regulations, especially the ones that were going to come forward in the EU on just reporting. Reporting can make a huge difference in how a brand's perceived and how they then account for their greenhouse gas emissions. But the brands have to be thinking about, how do I make a profit? Now, what their obligation is how do they make money? They sell products to brands. I mean, they sell products to consumers. The consumers buy, what they're interested in. So brands have to see what consumers care about, right? What are consumers buying? What do they say they're going to buy? What sort of what values do they think the brands should have? And then in that way, the brands are obligated. And then consumers, have shown that they do care about the environment. They do care about animals. They're interested in next-gen materials. And so I think brands really should be examining these materials, looking at them, starting to partner, starting to invest, but because it's a good business decision, not because it's good for the environment.
Yeah, I completely agree. The reality is that that is the core of making the business sustainable. It's yeah, to basically be competitive in those basic parameters that basically drive whether a consumer is actually going to buy something or not. So then we move on to consumers then. If everything is kind of down to, fashion houses being businesses and they respond mostly, right, to what their customers want, do you still think consumers are backing next-gen materials?
Yeah, so consumer research is a little bit of an art and a little bit of a science. So I think anybody who knows a lot about consumer research is going to say that in consumer research, consumers are telling you how they want to think of themselves, right? Not necessarily how they will act when they're put in front of that decision, right? Do I buy a product with a next-gen material that's more expensive, or a regular material that's not, that I know is worse for the environment? Right. But, how consumers think about themselves and how they want to see the future and their purchasing decisions is important. And in that aspect, next-gen materials are the winner by far. Like, there's absolutely no question about it. We have two consumer research, actually we have three, but two are US based. So we have US consumer research and we have Chinese consumer research. You can get those on our website for free. And the numbers are really exciting. So in the US, 92% of the respondents said that they would purchase next-gen materials. I've never seen numbers that high, right? And I did work in the food industry before, and we did a lot of consumer research that far exceeds anything else I've ever seen. And then of those, 41% are extremely likely to purchase. That's high. And 29% would pay more. exactly what that means. It's unclear, but they're willing to pay more because they see that value, and they are doing it because of the environment and animals. So 76% said that they would choose it because of sustainability, environmental reasons, and 71 because of animal cruelty. In China, the numbers are very, very similar. And we did both of those two because they're the highest purchasing countries in the world. So 90% of Chinese respondents said that they would purchase next-gen materials, and 70% of those said that they were extremely likely or likely to do it. And then of those, actually 62% said they would pay more. So it's really strong numbers, and then similar numbers to the US for the reasons. So 72% were because of sustainability and 68% were because of animals.
Right. Let's hope, as you said, right? Let's hope people put their money where their mouth is. We really want to see this, yeah, more. As you said, business is business. So for consumers who's actually paying for these products, price parity, quality, very, very important. That is also sort of why brands would buy these materials when they're good enough for their customers. Thank
Well,
you very much.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, but I know everyone wants to get into the details, so make sure you download the report too. So one other note that I would make on like a positive for the industry to be considering is, right, we do need more investment. That's clear. Like what we're going to see in Elaine's presentation very quickly is that investment did go up in the industry, and that's wonderful. And there's investment from private, right, normal investment, VC funds, angel investors, but there is investment from industry itself. And I think if you're a brand, I would really consider investing in next-gen materials because it solves a number of problems, right? So number one, you can own more of your supply chain, right? The industry's really caught in not knowing a lot of their supply chain because it's so long. And then two, you also control that material, right? So you have exclusive access to it. One example is Gucci with Demetra. So they released a bag with Billie Eilish in the fall, and they've decided that it's worth it for them to invest in creating their own material and owning it. I will say that there's also big opportunity for government investment, and that's how in other industries they really took off. So take electric vehicles or clean energy or even food. Food is a really great recent example. Both Singapore and Israel, the government's invested in food, and that's where a lot of the innovation's been taking place, and the products are closer to market. If I can do a little plug, so we are actually working with the U.S. government, with a congressperson, to introduce a bill to get more money into next-gen materials. So we'll be reaching out to key companies in the space. But right now, if you're really excited about this and you have a big name behind you, we'd love to hear you, because we're going to try and put together a coalition to support that action, because that's how we're going to get a really big jump in money into R&D and scaling.
Wow, that is exciting news. Yes, public funding is very, very powerful. So that's a great positive note too. We'll pause here with our kind of interview here. I will go through a few slides talking about more details in the report, and then we will get to Q&A when we can talk more with the audience. Okay,
Thanks.
so let me go back to sharing screen. Okay, should be working. All right. So I'm not going to go through the whole report. Hopefully everyone have already downloaded the report. And if not, please go into our website to download it. I'm just going to dive a little bit deeper into the investment part of the report. So this is actually good news. And honestly, I was pleasantly surprised when we were looking at the data, putting this together. I mean, the global VC funding scene has not been doing well at all. So in another report, it's been said that there's 42% decrease in VC funding across the board globally, deal count falling 30% to reach a 6-year low in 2023. So pleasant surprise when we put the numbers together and found that for next gen materials industry, we actually saw a 10% increase in terms of private investment funding in 2023. So all things relative, when the global market across the board is a 42% decrease, this is genuinely good news for next gen materials market. You will also see, we usually put the top 10 next-gen material companies and their funding activities in our report. One of the reasons, and I think that's very useful, like while we're looking at news about, startups failing in this space, and like how do we look, like digest that piece of news, and what does it mean for this whole industry, right? I think it's very helpful to look at, in the report, we cover 144 companies that work in next-gen materials. But if you look at, some of these companies are very, very young, like seed funding stage, and not a lot of funding has actually gone into these companies. So it's kind of useful to put things in context and look at who are the top 10 most funded companies, how much has actually gone into these companies. For example, the top one has always been, for some years now, Spiber. So over almost 600 million has been invested in Spiber over the years. So I think is as Nicole and I have done sort of through that little interview just now, is really important to dig into the details when looking at these news. So again, you'll see this graph in our report, and like feel free to like download that and use it in your deck, etc. So we saw a spike in 2021, and as you can see here, it's really a big spike there, like very abnormal. And then unfortunately it went down in 2022, but it's really nice to see things seems to be picking up again in 2023. So if you look at the bars, that's like the funding volume into the next gen material space. So very happy to see that things might be picking up a little bit, but still, I'm sure all of us are kind of feeling that drop from 2021 to 2022. Probably everyone is still feeling the hurt from that. But hopefully we're going to be seeing an upward trend again starting to 2023. The next thing we covered, we have these long form articles in our report to dive deeper into certain issues that challenges and opportunities that we see over the year. For 2023, we thought it would be interesting to look at the hype cycle for innovation. Again, putting things in context, right? So I don't know if everyone's familiar with the hype cycle. It's basically a theory developed by a consultancy firm called Gartner. Sorry, I just realized like the sun is in my face. Just look at the slides and not me. So this theory is that this is what typically happens with innovation, with emerging industries and technologies. This graph that you're seeing now is made as of 2018. And if you see, there are quite a few new industries at the time. For instance, if you look at the middle here, conversational AI platform, there's a little circle here, which means they projected. It started emerging in 2018, and then it's projecting that that's 5 to 10 years is going to reach plateau of productivity. So with this theory, there are 5 stages that these technologies industries would go through. So first of all, you have innovation trigger, when there's a technological breakthrough, right? And so there's a new product coming into the market. And then the second phase is the peak of inflated expectation, when just pretty much like things building up to a bubble. And then the third phase is the burst. So you fall into a trough of disillusionment. And then hopefully you then go to phase 4, which is slope of enlightenment, and then eventually to a plateau of productivity. And that last stage is when the technology is maturing and the industry is getting a bit more mature. So I want to kind of talk about that in relation to the next gen materials industry. First of all, just looking at that hype cycle, there are 2 stages of upward direction, which is the increasing expectations in society. So the first one, you can see it's very steep going up, and then it goes to the inflated expectation, and then it just falls. The next one is actually a more gentle upward climb. So just to talk, the first rise typically is driven by market hype, and then the second rise is actually maturity of innovation. So what have we seen in next gen material industry so far is that the innovation trigger pretty much happened around 2018, 2019. A lot of new companies came into the space. So that was like a very exciting time. And then very quickly in the next year or so, from 2020, 2021, as we just talked about, there was that spike in investment, like very, very steep spike. Kind of what we observed was around that time, we saw the mass media hype began. So you actually see this hot green topic all over business, industry, fashion, magazines, and blogs. And you keep hearing like apple leather, cactus leather, mushroom leather, and just as buzzwords used everywhere, right? At the same time, investors also seize this early opportunity to get one of those companies in their portfolio. So that also kind of explains why like there was so much investment activities all of a sudden. So that was an astonishing spike, and it reached like about 980 million, basically representing the investment amount of the previous 4 years combined. In hindsight, that really is abnormal. And was that going to be a sustainable growth, right? At the same time, brands at that time also was getting excited about next gen materials. So all these adding together, a bandwagon effect kicked in, and the innovation was pushed to its limits as all the brands are trying to get hold of these materials and then get it to market. And we've seen this firsthand, sort of acting as the connector in this industry. We try to minimize the friction because the gap in understanding like what these new materials are, the expectations, there is really a big gap. So for example, we've talked about this time and again, one of the main challenges for fashion brands, for example, is that innovative materials actually take years to get to be ready for commercialization, whereas fashion brands are used to sourcing materials within months and used to having so many different textures, colors, etc. to choose from. So there is definitely a lack of realization that things will take longer. Also, there's a gap in the performance requirements that fashion brands need, and like how long or like whether next gen materials are there yet. So basically then in 2022, we see the sign that the industry is kind of sliding into this trough of disillusionment. That's when you keep seeing the same stories of early success repeated over and over, like the same names, the same companies. But then people are not really seeing these materials, these products in the market in a big way. And so everyone started getting impatient, and also negative press started to emerge. And there's a lot of surrounding greenwashing issues, calling all vegan leather plastics, etc. So basically the innovation was discredited for not living up to this overinflated expectation of being perfectly sustainable and basically getting to market tomorrow. So that, of course, also with the pandemic disrupting pretty much everything from supply chain to funding availability. So definitely 2022 was not an easy year for anyone. So I guess the next question, though, is when are we gonna climb up the slope of enlightenment again? And like, what can we do in the meantime? What can we do to make that happen faster? What can we do to climb up that and that curve again? So sorry, oops. Yeah, so we went into more details about this hype cycle kind of analysis. So please do download the report and have a read about that and let us know what you think. And we can talk more about that in the Q&A as well. So I think before going to the Q&A, I just want to quickly cover one more thing. Brand partnerships, again, this is covered in our report. There has been quite a lot of highlights of brand partnerships in 2023 that we're excited to see. But again, as Nicole has highlighted, I mean, these are exciting stories. These are a lot of times smaller capsules, collection, etc. But it creates really great stories in the media. What we should also not forget is that a lot of brands are actually investing, developing their own materials in-house. And that probably until they're ready to show the world, like we won't hear about those happening and won't know that they're doing that in-house until they're ready to announce it to the world. But something like Gucci developing its own alternative leather material, that's very, very exciting indeed. And if you want to read more about everything regarding brand engagement, we also have another report that is completely focused on brand engagement. Also, there is a monthly lookbook. So the first one came out January, covering January. So again, you can download that from our website as well. So there's a quick summary of some of the data points that we've presented and provided more analysis in the State of the Industry report. Again, reminder to download the report if you haven't yet. And I think we can go into the Q&A part of this webinar now. So should I stop sharing for a bit here? Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Elaine. I hope everybody learned a lot from our analysis, and a huge thank you to Elaine because she's the one who did all of the data collection and analysis for our report. She was the main author, and it would not have happened without her. So,
thank you. But everyone in MII helped as well. So kudos to everyone in the team.
it is fun. We're a pretty small team, and so having everybody come in and work together for this is means a lot. So we have some really great questions. So we'll jump in just in order. And the first question is, the problem with new materials is scalability. Yep, agree. For a startup like mine, how can I seek help to move from prototype to pilot? So I think for that, it's really being able to prove that your material, right, and your technology is viable in the market. And that does go back to what we were initially talking about, is like, what is your plan to scale, right? How does your material fit into the existing supply chain? Right. And that's really what you need to prove. Another thing, if you are looking for investment, obviously investment's the key here to get the money to move into pilot. If you are looking for investment and you're talking to investors who don't know the industry really well, we do put together a lot of materials, including this report, to help you, including our consumer research. So it's really showing those investors that there is a market, there is demand for the materials, And then you can also show the competitive landscape. So I would go through and show all of that as well, because it really is about money. Elaine, would you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I think that focus on business is so important. And I think, Nicole has already mentioned it time and again. At the end of the day, especially you mentioned from prototype to pilot, in the beginning, you can kind of maybe count on people just like trying to help you, right? Like goodwill, and this is the right thing to do, and like angel investors, etc. Like in the very beginning, you're facing a different audience who might set the bar sort of lower compared to like really just business first audience. So prepare to kind of have to make that shift and be able to talk to the business audience, be able to convince the business audience about your business case and the business value that your material bring.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. One actually other thing that I thought I'd mention that some material companies tell us would be really helpful, and we aren't seeing this as much in industry, is letters of support from brands. So that when you are trying to prove to investors that you do have this strong business case, and I can't say this is really easy, right? But if you can get brands who can say, look, if you can do X, Y, and Z, we will be supporting you, we'll be buying your products, or even getting names on as advisors, I think would add you a lot of legitimacy. Number two is, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's basically a scientist looking for jobs in the industry. And I am so sorry that you have been having trouble, because that's one of the areas we see there's the most need. We need more material scientists, more engineers in the industry, because really none of this is going to happen without the science, right? And going back to the material science done right, really thinking about that end product and the performance attributes and aesthetics you need to meet, that's where the scientist skill comes into play. I would say we've debated about trying to have a like matchmaking service. We just haven't been able to do it. It's been a small team. We've had some other priorities we have to do. So my recommendation for anybody looking, especially as a scientist in the industry, is find the companies. You can get that on our website at our list of innovators. And a lot of them do have job openings on their websites. So I know recently I've looked at Ecovative, I've looked at MycoWorks. So I would find them and just look at their websites. You can also reach out, really stress your scientific credentials. You can find people on LinkedIn, and that'd be my recommendation to reach out. Okay. Third question, what were the challenges you faced initially in the market, and how did you overcome it? So if that's geared towards us, I think it's a very different question than what's going to be at the industry. We are a nonprofit. We do not ourselves create any materials. So I think the companies in the space have a lot more issues. I would say the biggest ones are, right, you need to find the right scientific co-founders. You need to find that right technology. You need to really understand the competitive landscape and how your materials fit in, and what is your path to market and to scalability. And really having that all planned out, I think is critical.
Yeah, I would just add that again, we are not the companies like selling, like innovating and selling the products, but we do support companies doing that, and we feel for you. Like we're like walking this journey with you, and the past few years 2 years, let's say, have not been easy for anyone. I think a lot of the challenges that we've heard, what we've tried to do is kind of separate that into, there are certain kind of business challenges that, to be very honest, as an outsider, a nonprofit, we can't really do that for you. But in terms of like kind of taking burdens off your shoulders, in that is why we create these reports, like increase the transparency in the industry. we put it together, these data sets, so that like who's who, who you can reach out to, like in terms of investors, like who are the usual suspects, like who are even like interested in this space, right? And in terms of other companies, like who's doing what, and maybe which space is less saturated because how many companies are working on a certain material versus another one. So we try to do that work so that you don't have to spend your time doing these things, and you can focus on actually building the business. So, but yeah, I think the main thing here is that we know it's been hard for everyone, and yeah, we are walking this journey with you as well.
And I would say on that too, exactly what Elaine said, but some of our resources that would be helpful in thinking about that business case, our white space report that we put in there is really useful. And so is the state of the industry, just looking at the opportunities in the market. So 2 areas that we think there needs to be significantly more companies in the space is fur and silk. Right. There's very few fur innovators and a little bit more in silk, but still not nearly as much as leather. So we really do encourage more companies to get into those spaces. And a little preview, we are working on our What Makes Fur Fur report. So if you've gone to our website, we do have What Makes Silk Silk, which really helps you understand what is it that makes silk special, and how do I use innovation technology to recreate it? The fur report should be coming out at the end of April. So you should all be subscribed to our newsletter. Stay tuned for that.
And that's very timely, as very unfortunately, fur is making a comeback. I mean, well.
I know. If you haven't read already, there's a Vogue Business article that came out. Oh, goodness, I'm losing track of days. This week or last week, basically talking about is fur back, and that's a problem. It's a great article. I can find it and put it in the chat too. Okay, next question is, at the moment, which do you think are the best sustainable and vegan leather alternatives in terms of supply and performance? So we get this all the time, and it's a completely legitimate question. It's a lot more complicated than giving a list of companies. So what I do recommend, and it also depends, are you a brand, right? What are you looking for? What are the applications? What's your timeline? Right? What's your price? Right? What scale? So it's really hard to say what I would, and then as an investor, right? If you're an investor, what are you looking for? So my recommendation is, if you're a brand, look at the reports Elaine showed at the end of her presentation. So our brand engagement report and our monthly lookbooks. And what they're showing is products that are on market, right? The materials have been made into a product. So, right, a shoe, a dress, bag. And you can see those applications that you're looking for. And then I would look to those companies, because it is a proven concept. They have gotten to market. Okay. Sorry, Elaine, I've been talking a lot. Do you want to take the next few questions?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so the next question is, are you looking at the type of investors, strategic investors versus financial investors? How are they developing? And many brands have invested in next-gen materials. Okay. I guess okay, let me start with, in the report, I don't think we have a list of investors. So for like who has invested in these startups, the list is too long, so we only include the investors in the previous year. I think a lot of what you mentioned as strategic investors, or a lot of what you see in the news about H&M, etc., kind of investing in certain startups, a lot of those also came from like innovation competitions, right? Like prizes and grants and things like that. So yeah, completely true. There are different types of investments. And so I think, again, we keep encouraging you to, like, everyone to look more into the details. A lot of these things go into the media, becomes like great stories, right? But winning in an innovation competition and actually getting an investment, especially a financial investment, like in a proper round of investment funding round are two very, very different things. So hopefully that kind of answered your question. Yeah, but I think a lot of the bigger stories that we see in the press might be a lot of like the support that brands are trying to show to very, very early investors.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, and I'm not sure that if this is what you're getting at, is that the brands are getting like exclusivity agreements or rights of first refusal with materials. I know there's a lot of people who think that's bad. I don't. Honestly, if that's what helps get the products to market, then that's what we need. And in the beginning, remember, we're not talking about huge volumes of materials. Right. It's not like a brand who comes in and invests and then has an exclusivity agreement is preventing at this stage, right, preventing additional products from being sold or used. They are generally using the whole supply. And that does give the material company the opportunity to then have a deeper partnership, have some back and forth with the brands, and refine the products as needed, and then get to market.
So the next question, does your report have any key insights about innovation in the fiber to fiber recycling world? Nicole, feel free to add more to that, but to start with, our report does not focus on recycling, first of all. I think so first of all, the premises of the report is the end goal is to create these very high performance and more sustainable version of like alternative to animal-based materials such as leather, fur, wool, etc. Right? And then we separate them into like what's the input. So whether it's plant-based, whether it's from micro fermentation, etc. So yeah, we don't focus as to like, it has to like the process has to be fiber to fiber, but we look more to like, what is the end product here? And then what input went into it.
Yeah, I can add to that in that there's massive problems, right, in the fashion industry or like material supply chain. And recycling is one of them, and a really big one, right? The amount of waste we have is like untenable. There's no plans now to know what to do with it. Right? We do need to stop consuming as much. But when I started MII and how we thought about this is we really are focused at the beginning stage of the industry. So the creation of materials. And if you look at and there's a lot of issues with life cycle assessments, right? They do not look at end of life because once the product is in the hands of the consumers, it's really hard to track what happens with it. So when you're looking at life cycle assessments, you really are looking at the beginning stages. If you look at the entire impact that a fashion brand has on the environment, the vast majority of it comes from their choice of raw materials. So it does depend by brand, but it's between like 62 and 80%. So we generally average that to say about 3/4 of a brand's environmental impact comes from the choice of raw materials. So that's where we're focused. And the companies that are in this space, everybody I know is really thinking about end of life. It's a very, very difficult question and not something that I think anybody has an answer to yet.
Because I'm seeing more and more questions coming in, and then just looking at the time, I will type some answers into answer, and so we will answer some of these live, but we will also just answer it by typing it in some of these. So in the meantime, the next question is, where do you see marketing playing a role in the movement for next-gen materials? Oh, where do we start? I will start, and Nicole, yeah, I'm sure you have a lot of insights to share too. From me, I've said it time and again. I think we need to understand sustainability. There is no perfectly sustainable thing in this world, and I think if we can all kind of start off with that being like the understanding, nobody should be claiming for that they have a perfect solution. They have a perfectly sustainable solution to anything. I definitely think that, because recently I've been looking at other new industries as well, like for instance, the EV world, where there are reports coming out saying that actually hybrids are worse, that, the numbers are like 5 times worse than, and then when I look at those headlines, but then again, digging into the details, I think a lot of uh, the conversation, the narrative, especially in media, is like the gotcha. Like, you lied about something, you exaggerated about how good you are. I got you. Like, that's a misrepresentation. Um, sure, like that is a problem. Like, misrepresentation surely is a problem. But I also think, what is the value of like this social bashing, and like what is the real issue we're talking about here? If we want to talk about, is hybrid cars good or not, like compare that with the incumbents, compare that to like, is it actually better than combustion cars, right? So, but then all these big headlines is just comparing to what it's claiming, and it's actually worse than what it said. But when you ask the real question, which is it worse than what's we've been using for like the past decades and killing the world, it's actually better. So I think that is what we should be focusing on. And I think there's a lot that marketing, like creating that narrative, can do to help the movement for next gen materials.
Yes, thank you. Elaine, I think you're right. So there's only about 7 minutes left. Do you want me to, I can like sort of go through some of these questions pretty quickly. And if you do want to like add anything, or you can, I know Elaine said she's going to respond to some of the comments. And just so everyone knows, we are going through the Q&A. I have seen a couple of questions in the general chat. I don't think we're going to have time to get to those. If you have a like desperate question, put it in the Q&A. So yeah, and on the marketing, the only other thing I'll add is just be honest. Like that to me is the biggest issue. And we just have to be realistic, and it is about educating the reporters too, right? And that's what we try and do about the issues in the development of materials, and progress, not perfection, right? We do talk about that a lot. Next question is, do designers still play a big role in this industry, or more engineers and scientists are needed rather than designers? So I do think science is the answer. I think obviously everybody's going to need to accept these long term, but and I wonder if you're a designer and you have a different perspective, but in general, fashion designers really, they're the creative ones. They're the ones who sort of look at what's available and say, oh, wow, like I can see this, I can have a vision for this type of material. And we're just not there yet. There's not enough of the materials for them to have choices. Like Elaine was saying before, there's limited colors, limited supply, right? Limited textures. And so what we need right now is more innovation, and that happens through science. Next question is, the share of innovative materials in the market is promising, but it worries me. How do you think the shareholders are doing? So if you're talking about just shareholders, so this is public companies, there's very few. I mean, I can think of two, one of which is not doing well, that just went into bankruptcy, right? So RenewCell is one of them. So it's very early, right? That's why a lot of companies have not gone public. They're not yet at the stage where they are able to be profitable. And that's a key component to being public and being accountable to your shareholders. And in case, which there's no reason you would know, I actually was a securities law attorney. So I did represent companies all the time in lawsuits and issues with the shareholders. So I am quite experienced in that area. Can I share any information about the bill that we're working on with the US government? Yes, it's a couple things we're working on too. One is additional funding for next gen innovation. So basically copying things like money into clean energy, we need the government to be putting money into next gen materials. Another issue we're working on with another congressperson is the tariff issue. So tariffs coming into the United States are significantly higher for next gen materials, or materials that are not animal based. So for something like a leather, a synthetic leather or even next-gen leather can have 30% higher tariffs than an animal-based leather. And that's going to significantly impact the price parity. So those are the two things we're working on. We will share more information as they happen, but we're working on drafting those bills right now. Next question is, it seems like so many brands aren't really moving to innovative materials. Is this mainly because of scalability or are there other reasons? Yeah, we touched on a little bit. There's so much polyester clothing out there. Yep. So polyester estimates are, it's about 70% of all of the material used in the fashion industry. And the issue with polyester is it's extremely cheap, right? So it's a petrochemical derived product and very, very cheap. So a couple things. Number one, there's not a lot of products on the market yet. So that's why you aren't seeing a lot. You cannot really go into the store and just find something, right? These are specialty collections, and it is growing. So this is a scale issue. The reason we're also not at scale is because a lot of companies are still working on the performance, right? If you've heard me talk before about my vegan cheese example, I'm going to tell it again here, which is in the food industry, there were so many vegan cheeses that made it to market that, in my opinion, were inedible. Like, just needed to go straight into the garbage. I have no idea how they made it onto the market. And what that meant is that people would try a product and say, oh my God, vegan cheese is awful. Like, all vegan cheeses are awful. So they would extrapolate that experience with one product to a broader industry. We really need to learn from that and not do that. So my recommendation to anybody is don't go to market with a subpar product, right? You really do need to ensure that it does meet like the brand and consumers' needs. And I think a lot of brands are there. But I would look at our state of the industry, our brand engagement reports for examples of things that are on the market. Specifically about polyester, a recommendation we make to the industry is polyester and silk are on the same spectrum. So when you look at it from a material science perspective, the technology used to create a silk is also the same, a next-gen silk is obviously the same as a polyester, a next-gen polyester. Silk price point is significantly higher than polyester. So if you are developing, if you'd like to tackle that issue, we do recommend thinking about going to market with silks first, and then you can get to scale. And then that technology can also be used to attack the polyester issue. Oh, another question about silk. Somehow lost the mark. So yes, if you're talking the questions about using silk and using ancestral knowledge, there's a really great nonprofit, biomimicry, which does look at that. So what does nature tell us in order to create new materials? And there's a lot of lessons to be learned there. I do not believe, I don't know if this is part of what you're saying, but we look to the past or things we've done before the technological revolution, because there were significant issues. So with silk in general, it is a highly water-intensive crop. It's actually, there's a lot of slave labor involved. The workers, because you have to boil the silk cocoons, there's a lot of third-degree burns with the workers. It's not something that we should go back to just because it's like a quote unquote natural product that our ancestors used. It's something that we can solve with material innovation. So I know we're at 10 o'clock right now. Sorry we didn't get through all the questions. We did really try. But thank you all so much for joining, and look at our website. We really do have an answer to a lot of these questions, and we will hopefully be having a webinar around once a month. If there's any specific questions you think we should be addressing, maybe we could do a webinar on that topic. So just let us know. Sorry, I know Elaine's working really hard.
Yeah, sorry, I muted myself because I was like typing. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining. Sorry, bad on me, time control. Not really. Yeah, so everyone, again, encourage you to download all these reports from MII. They're all free resources. So hopefully this session has been informative and we're here to support the whole community, and everybody take care. Thank you.